Some people would like us to believe that COVID is in the distant past, but tell that to Victoria Police, who still find themselves tied up in multiple different lawsuits against people that they assaulted during the COVID era. Yes, they assaulted, and I can say that without fear of being sued because the courts have agreed that that is, in fact, what happened. But funnily enough, they seem to be pretty sore losers. They lost in court, but they are fighting on multiple different fronts against multiple different people, trying to make their victims pay costs. It seems to be a last-ditch, desperate strategy at saving face, or at least lashing out and punishing the people that they victimized during the COVID era. The latest such person is Nick Patterson. Before I bring him on, I want to give credit to Avi Yemeni and Rebel News for continuing to follow this story. Thank you to them for bringing this story back to the surface. And I am bringing you now, Nick Patterson, to you because I think this is a really important story. We all need to know how Victoria Police are lashing out and how Nick Patterson continues to fight back. Nick, welcome to the Topher Project. How are you?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, mate.
Look, it's my pleasure. You're someone that I respect. I've had a little bit to do with you over the years in terms of I found out about what happened with you when it first happened. I was kind of a little bit cautious with you. I'm gonna put my hand up and say I was one of the people that got a little bit sucked in by a lot of the negative press that went around you. Since then, I've gotten to know you. I've gotten to know your story, and I have the utmost respect for you. For anyone that's new, for anyone that doesn't know your story, go right back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about, in brief terms, what happened, what were you doing, why were you doing it, what did the police do, and what did that lead to in court?
Yeah, look, as soon as the lockdowns occurred in Victoria, I was the first business to be publicly open, and I attracted a lot of attention. I owned a gym, and when the police would come, we would do videos. These videos became viral videos, and then I got more and more, police turning up to my gym. 22 police turned up, 18 police cars another day. Channel 7 had police come to my house. It was out of control. It was just ridiculous, and that motivated me to start organising rallies. So I organised a lot of the rallies, the anti-lockdown rallies, and I worked with others that were also organising those rallies. And we were targeted at a particular rally, and we were told to leave the area by the police, and we were trying to comply with this order. And then public order response engaged in a violent assault of our mate. And we went in to defend him, and it ended up being there was 42 police, and there were 6 of us, and they dislocated my shoulder badly, belted us up, put me in jail for a month, put me on the strictest of bail conditions, and they dragged me through a prosecution to which they knew that there was no grounds for this prosecution. They falsely charged me. They falsified evidence against me and my friend Adam Rube. And in the end, we ended up having a win in the court where the judge ruled that the police had committed unjustified violence against us. All of the charges were dropped against us, all 23 charges, and that the police had falsified evidence against us, and as a result, the judge had dismissed all of their evidence, made it inadmissible, which means you essentially won, and it proves that there is an abusive process in the court.
So can I just pause you here? Because not only have they said that you didn't commit any crimes, what this judge has said, this is not my opinion or your opinion, what this judge has said in saying that the police have falsified evidence is that the police have committed criminal acts. That is a criminal act. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, she's also said that they, in multiple times, one of the particular statements she made was that the police committed unjustified violence.
Yeah. Which is assault. In layman's terms, the police committed assault against you.
Yeah. And it was the more serious of the assaults. I mean, they ripped my shoulder right out of its socket. It wasn't like they put their hand out and pushed you, or a little bit rough with you. They were using their batons, capsicum spray, and there was 42 of them.
I hope you're enjoying my interview with Nick Patterson. We'll get back to that in just a second. But first, I am 100% viewer supported. There are 2 ways you can help me to keep the Topher Project going. The first is to buy me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. The second is to check out my range of books, DVDs, and merch. Now, I'm wearing my Good People Break Bad Laws design. This is one that for me came out of the COVID era, the very same era that Nick and I are talking about. This is the original design, which goes on the front. That's an updated design that goes on the back by popular request. Both of those, as well as my books, my DVDs, and a range of other things, are all available at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. And by grabbing any of that, you are helping me to keep the Topher Project going. Thank you so much. Let's get back to my interview with Nick.
So in light of that ruling, one would think that the victim of this malicious prosecution, so being dragged through the court for years for something they didn't do, which was blatantly obvious, you would think that the victim would get the after winning would get their legal costs covered, which is generally what happens in the magistrate's court.
Excuse me. No, I would expect that they would get some pretty hefty compensation, and that some of those police officers responsible for the assault and for the falsification of evidence would themselves go to prison. That's what I would expect.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about justice then. Now, justice is really expensive, and you're right.
You can have all the justice that you can afford.
Well, yeah. David Limbrick actually mentioned this in Parliament. He called upon the Attorney General after we had the ruling against those police, where he called upon the Attorney General to commence proceedings against those police officers involved, and nothing's happened. All of those police officers, for the most, I think there might be one who's not working anymore, but all the rest of them have been either promoted or they're still working.
Yeah.
Even though they've committed violent crimes and assaulted people. So you can see that the law doesn't apply to them. Yeah. I've reached out to IBAC to commence some kind of proceeding against them. They initially said that it wasn't in the public interest to do so, even though we had a huge amount of public interest. And then they said that they forwarded the investigation over to the police to investigate themselves for their own corruption. And obviously the police who investigate see the police as doing no wrong. And that we had committed all the offences. And then after the ruling, I reached out to IBAC again, and I gave them all of the material. I gave them the Channel 7 reports, the ruling, and I said, in light of this, I want you to commence some kind of action against these police who committed these offences. And that was a year ago. I've only just heard back from IBAC saying that they have receipt of my complaint a year later. A year later, right? So the system doesn't work. It's completely busted in favor of the government, because it works for them, but it doesn't work for us. So I'm just doing my best with what I have, and what we do have is we have a lot of people power. We have like I've been very blessed because of people like yourself and Avi and others who have helped get my message out, and they've helped me to get a lot of support. But it is very hard to get justice. But that's sort of the trajectory that I'm on now. So I had a costs application to get my legal costs, which have been over $300,000. Just so you know, that's been the cost. It's probably closer to $350,000 with because there's other elements to that. Like we've had interstate barristers. We've got to house them. We've got to get the accommodation, all these sorts of things.
Travel and accommodation, etc.
Yeah. Now, you would think that if the police committed all the violence, and that's been determined, and that
which they did,
all of their evidence had been removed and deemed inadmissible because it was illegally obtained, and that the charges were falsified against us. In light of all of this, surely they could. The bare minimum is you pay the legal fees, because their actions have caused me to be at a significant loss for something I didn't do.
I'll go further than that, Nick. I would say it would be another injustice if they didn't pay those costs.
Yes, I agree. So what the judge did is she allowed the prosecution to discontinue the proceedings, and we've got really strange legislation for the county court and the Supreme Court, wherein if the prosecution discontinue, they're seen to be doing everything legitimately and they're being fair. Now, a discontinuance is different to a stay of proceedings, but the judge made a clear error, in my opinion, of law, because once all of that evidence was deemed inadmissible, that is a stay of proceedings, and that proves an abusive process. Now, the judge said that there was an abusive process. That's an automatic, I get costs. But then that was a year ago. But then a year later, when we had our cost hearing, she backtracked and said, I didn't mean abuse of the court's process. I mean an abuse of the police process. Now, both our barristers said that's ridiculous. That whenever a judge says abusive process, it only means one thing, and it's abuse of the court's process. So the judge is backtracking to mitigate any liability of the police or the prosecution to pay costs. She also didn't see that didn't consider that the prosecution had done anything wrong, even though the prosecution have an obligation and a duty to look through all of the evidence and all of the body camera footage to determine whether or not these guys had actually committed the alleged offences. Now, I would say they would have looked at the evidence, but they were pressured to prosecute us for vindictive reasons, because you could look at that evidence for 5 minutes and you could see clearly that the police committed the violence and not our group of 6.
Nick, this is happening all over the place. I'll mention Monica Smith, the fact that the Victoria Police were found to have wrongfully arrested her multiple times in one day when she beat them in court. I'll mention again Avi Yemeni, and thanks to him for bringing this story back to light. He sued Victoria Police for wrongful arrest because he was arrested whilst working as a journalist, and he won as well. In my case, they brought charges against me for alleged incitement, and I can't help but notice that those charges were brought against me the very week that I announced I was going to make my documentary Battleground Melbourne, and those charges were dropped at the very next court proceeding after Daniel Andrews resigned as Premier of Victoria. I can't help but feel that that's probably not a coincidence. The abusive process is very widespread. It's far more than in just your case. You mentioned you've had a lot of support, a lot of people backing you, but we, as people, we need spearheads like yourself to back. What is it that you're doing now to try and hold Victoria Police accountable, even with these costs?
Well, I have a civil action going at the moment, so I do have that. I am suing them. And I don't have to pay for my legal fees for that. So that's okay. But so I don't have any financial issues there. I have been brought to financial ruin. However, I've had a lot of people support me with my legal fees thus far.
Sure.
I'm appealing this decision for the costs because I have a really good case. And you go through all of this process of going through the magistrates court, going through the county court, which are administrative courts, but they don't really have any equity, which is fairness applied to them.
Right.
When you go to the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals with 3 judges, fairness is something that they do look at, equity. And I couldn't imagine that they would look at this situation and go, you know what, you should have to pay your own legal costs, even though you committed none of the offences and they committed offences against you.
Yeah.
So I'm appealing that decision from the judge. There is a lack of case law for people in my situation getting costs back in the county court or Supreme Court. So we're going to this to the Supreme Court to set a precedent, and we're going to go all out and get this precedent because it's we've got really good evidence to be able to get and a really good case to get a precedent. Now, if we set the precedent that we're hoping to set, it will take away the ability of the police and the prosecution to discontinue proceedings and to be able to claim that there was no abusive process when there clearly was an abusive process. They will have to acknowledge that, which would then enable the people to get their costs back, and it will make the state or the police, or it will make the prosecution liable for those costs. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm just raising funds for for that, and I've had a lot of support, but I need a lot more because it's hard. It's hard enough to take it on, but then to have the financial burden. You know, I've got five children at home. It's hard. So
the impact on your wife and your kids, it's a lot.
Yeah. That's the biggest one. It's actually more my wife. You know, she struggles because she cares about whether or not we've got enough food. She worries about those things. I don't worry about them so much. I always feel confident that we'll be able to maintain everything that we need to maintain to sustain the children. But that's the biggest one. But if I lose, which I'm not going to lose, I'm absolutely confident. But the issue that a lot of people have and why they don't take it to the Supreme Court or to the Court of Appeals is if you lose, you then have to pay the legal fees of the police and the prosecution, which could be a huge amount of money. I don't care. Let's go. Let's do it. They started this, and I'm going to do my part to finish it because I know that, like I'm a biblical guy, as you are. He who endures to the end shall be saved. I know that I need to finish the course. And if I win this precedent, nobody else has to set a precedent like this. It's already there. Yeah. So that would mean that anyone else in a similar situation to mine, if they're prosecuted by the police, unlawfully arrested, have evidence falsified against them, and then they win, they can automatically get costs. That's what we're going for, and I'm confident that we can win it. I just need some more support to be able to fund this so that we can get the right legal team, which we're sort of halfway there. I've just got to get the rest.
Well, Nick, I'm happy to help be the wind in your sails. What's the URL? Where should people go if they're looking to support you to win that fight?
Yeah, I've got a custom donation page called Fight Corrupt Police. So, people can donate there. And if they just fightcorruptpolice.com. Sometimes it's got to be www.fightcorruptpolice.com, depending on the browser. All the money goes through a custom donation. And then I use that to fund the, the legal
proceedings. The fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Nick, you're a fighter by nature. Your background, of course, was in mixed martial arts, etc., and you've proven yourself to have the heart for a fight in a legal and a cultural and a spiritual sense as well. I tip my hat to you, and very, very grateful that you're doing what you're doing. Like you said, you're grateful for all the support that you've had, but at the same time, without people like you, there is no one to support. So thank you for doing what you do. Go well, and I plan to stay across this story as it develops. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, brother. God bless.
You too. Thank you for watching the Topher Project and my interview with Nick Patterson. Please check out his URL and support his campaign to bring accountability to Victoria Police despite their ability to play all the games that they play. Also, if you'd like to help me keep the Topher Project going, you can do that by grabbing my book, Good People Break Bad Laws. This is about civil disobedience in the modern age, and it talks about the very same COVID lockdowns and protests that what Nick was talking about in this interview. Then there's Good Christians Break Bad Laws, which is about the theology of civil disobedience from a Christian perspective. Battleground Melbourne. Now, Nick doesn't appear in this documentary, but we talk a lot in this documentary about Melbourne, the lockdowns, the protests, and all of that craziness that went on as Melbourne went from being the world's most livable city to the world's most locked down city, and all the violence that went along with that. That is also available at my website, but you can also watch it for free at battlegroundmelbourne.com. I had the privilege of directing this documentary, but it's not my story. I didn't create this story. This was written and created by the people of Melbourne and the people of Victoria, and the courage they showed when they did what was right, even when their government had gone very, very wrong. So you can watch that for free at battlegroundmelbourne.com. I'm going to keep it there for free for as long as I possibly can. But if you'd like to have a copy to put on your shelf, to loan out to others, or just to support my work, you can get the DVD as well. All of that is available along with my t-shirts, hoodies, and more at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thank you so much for watching to the end. The algorithm loves you, and so do I. Please like, comment, subscribe, and as always, stay free.